Start. Assalamualaikum, Dr. Saab ji. Good afternoon, ji. This is Javed Qureshi, and thank you very much for dialing in. We have a very exciting panel here with us today, and we hope to spend the next couple of hours talking about the budget and getting some perspective from some very, very smart people. Before I introduce the panelists, I would like perhaps to hand it over to Dr. Zilaf Munir, who's the chairperson of PBC, just for her words and maybe a little bit of her thoughts on how she sees the budget. So over to you, Dr. Sahiba.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Javed. First and foremost, I would really like to thank all of our esteemed panelists for being here. Thank you for giving us the time and the opportunity to be able to learn from you. I would also like to thank all of our participants and all of the visitors, as well as, of course, all of our members who are part of PBC. PBC has been engaged, not just this year, but for many years, with the policymakers. And the objective has been, PBC is not an PBC is an advocacy body. It represents over 100 members who are basically from the formal corporate sector, are paying taxes, which are 1/3 of the direct taxes that are collected, are responsible for 40% of the exports, and also providing over 3 million jobs. Our objective has always been as an advocacy body, not a trade body, neither a chamber. And what we work towards is sustainable, inclusive growth in the economy, which is export-led. After 4 years of difficult macro stabilization, what we did want to see this year was what measures are going to be taken which point towards growth, and specifically export-led growth, and how the fiscal space is going to be best utilized to be incentivizing in that direction. What we believe in and have advocated is broadening of the tax base, which is fundamentally important. What we also have asked for is competitiveness, equitable taxes, competitive environment, competitive rates, so that the businesses can flourish and invest. And at the same time, structural reforms, which include, besides the tax reforms, the energy reforms, as well as the regulatory reforms for the cost and ease of doing business. So our initial impressions from this budget was that the signaling was good. The direction seemed to be in the right direction. However, what we would have also liked to see is, rather than this being a fiscal balancing exercise, to have had a more longer-term view, which is what we had asked for, is at least have a 3-year plan that is something that will provide some confidence that the consistency in the policies is going to be there in whatever measures that are going to be taken. So what we did see, and what we actually welcomed, were the relief in the salary classes. There is, for the export sector, there is some incentives that were given. For the IT, some incentives, the super tax for over 500 million was reduced from 10 to 8%. So these were measures, and what we hear about is the new tax operating model, which we have been hearing about for the past 2 years, and we really would like to see it going into earnest implementation. So with that kind of a background, I think we are all here to be listening from you as to what you think this budget has been about, and what do you think it offers, and where do you think it goes? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zalif. Let me introduce our first speaker, which is Asif Haroon Saab. He's a tax partner in AF Ferguson and Company. He has been in the profession for over 15 years. His experience is spread over a wide spectrum of industries, covering some of the largest national and multinational corporations in different industries. Asif Saab, over to you. You're very well known to most of us, so over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Javed Saab, for the introductions. So, first of all, I'm grateful to the BBC for hosting this webinar and providing a valuable platform for engaging with the industry to listen to their perspective. So, in this session, I will try to walk through some major amendments made to finance bill in the three tax laws. So, my presentation basically is divided into three broad categories. One is relating to direct taxation, the amendments in the income tax side. The second will be sales tax and FET related. And third, in the third part, I will try to mention some issues which were expected to be addressed but not addressed in the finance bill. So from the direct taxation side, we all know that the proposal is very encouraging that they have started at least reducing the taxes which were increased over the last few years. So the starting point of reduction is the annual salary of 2.2 million. From there onwards, the slab rates have been is enlarged in a way that the average reduction in the tax incidence is at least 10 to 15%. So the highest starting slab rate is now 7 million per annum salary, which was previously 4.1 billion. And as a result of abolishment of the surcharge on salary income of above 10 million, the overall reduction across the board above the salary of 2.2 million is around 10 to 15%. So that is very positive side of this budget. Uh, the other positive side is that the CVT, which was imposed in 2022 on the foreign assets of the tax residents, that has also been abolished. We all know that the nuisance that has created in the past, and still this levy is subject to Supreme before the federal court. But keeping in view the fact that कि इस levy के वजह से the exodus of the foreign assets declarations that had happened. So it's yet again a good move of the government to abolish this levy. इसमें टैक्स भी नहीं आ रहा था और इसके न्यूसेंस फैक्टर बहुत ज्यादा थे. इंश्योरेंस प्रोडक्ट्स के ऊपर इंडिविजुअल्स के लिए जो लाइफ इंश्योरेंस और तकाफुल प्रोडक्ट्स होते हैं, इस पे एक लगाया गया है. और आई थिंक दैट कि ये टैक्स ने वो उसका मिसयूज जो हो रहा था इंश्योरेंस प्रोडक्ट्स का, लाइफ इंश्योरेंस प्रोडक्ट एक्चुअली फॉर्म के ऊपर थी, बट इन सब्सटेंस दोज वर द इन्वेस्टमेंट प्रोडक्ट्स. सो एज अ रिजल्ट जब 7 साल से नीचे मेच्योरिटी पे अगर कोई कैश होगा और उस पर जो नेट बेनिफिट अगर कोई उसको आएगा, तो वो टैक्सेशन डाली है इन्होंने 15%, जो विद इन 1 ईयर आप इन कैश कराएंगे या मेच्योर होंगी या मतलब वो उस पर रियलाइजेशन हो जाएगी. और 10% है बिटवीन 1 to 7 years. और खुदा ना खास्ता डेथ या डिसेबिलिटी के ऊपर जो भी बेनिफिट मिलेगा वो टैक्सेबल नहीं है. तो दैट दिस आई थिंक दैट अमेंडमेंट हैज अगेन clarified the ambiguity surrounding this insurance product, which was technically being misused. Now that has been tapped by the government. बाकी जो इसमें और रिलीफ मेजर्स जिस तरह अभी डॉक्टर साहबा ने भी जिक्र किया, तो सुपर टैक्स के अंदर अब टेक्निकली इन्होंने 500 मिलियन एंड अबव के ऊपर जो है वो लगाई है और उसको भी 10% से 8 पे कर दिया है. और ये जो तीन सेक्टर थे, बैंकिंग, ईएनपी एंड फर्टिलाइजर, इन पे 10% ही है. और उनकी जो स्लैब पहले थी 500, वो उसको थोड़ा नीचे कर दिया है 150 मिलियन. तो वो एक अब टेक्निकली दो कैटेगरीज बन गई हैं सुपर टैक्स में. एक ये तीन सेक्टर्स हैं, बैंकिंग, ईएनपी एंड फर्टिलाइजर, और बाकी जो है वो दूसरा सेक्टर है कोई इनके अलावा जिनकी 500 मिलियन से अबव है. तो ये तीन सेक्टर्स पे 10% है सुपर टैक्स आज भी, गोइंग फॉरवर्ड अबव 150 मिलियन, और इनके अलावा जो लोग हैं उनकी 500 मिलियन अबव पे 10 नहीं है, 8 है। दैट इज बिग रिलीफ विच वॉज डिमांडेड बाय द इंडस्ट्री। इसके अलावा जो रिलीफ मेजर्स इसमें प्रपोज किए गए हैं एक्सपोर्टर्स के लिए, वी नो दैट कि 1+1 यानी एक 2% टैक्स कटता था, एक मिनिमम था, एक एडजस्टेबल था। तो जो एडजस्टेबल था वो उन्होंने ख़त्म कर दिया, विच इज़ गुड फॉर द एक्सपोर्ट्स। इसके अलावा जो 153 जो सर्विसेज के ऊपर जो विदहोल्डिंग होती थी, वो उन्होंने जो मैक्सिमम रेट 15 था वो 14 कर दिया, 14% कर दिया। सिर्फ इनको 4-5 लोगों को उन्होंने कहा है कि स्टिल इनका भी 5% ही होगा, डॉक्टर्स, आर्किटेक्ट्स, अकाउंटेंट्स, और फिर तब डॉक्टर्स और आर्किटेक्ट्स और ये अभी ऑल नो दैट कि वैसे ही उनकी विदहोल्डिंगें नहीं होती। तो आई डोंट नो कि इनको अभी बाहर रखने का क्या पर्पस है, बट एनीवेज एक ये भी पॉजिटिव है कि जो 15% हेडलाइन रेट था विदहोल्डिंग का सर्विसेज सेक्टर में, उसको रिड्यूस कर दिया गया। लाइकवाइज द रिलीफ हैज बीन गिवन टू द टर्मिनल एंड द पोर्ट ऑपरेटर्स, उनकी भी जो टैक्स विदहोल्डिंग है 15 से 12 कर दी गई है। इसी तरीके से जो म्यूचुअल फंड्स और एनपीओस, उनको एग्जेम्पशन सर्टिफिकेट लेने में एक प्रोसीजरल डिफिकल्टी होती थी, तो जो अब अमेंडमेंट है उसने उस प्रोसीजर को जो है वो थोड़ा सा सिंप्लीफाई किया। यट अगेन स्टिल अभी भी म्यूचुअल फंड्स के हवाले से जो प्रपोजल है उसकी वर्डिंग में अमेंडमेंट इज रिक्वायर्ड, बट एनीवेज इट्स अ गुड पॉजिटिव अमेंडमेंट। इसके बाद जो टैक्सेशन मेजर्स हैं, मतलब ऑब्वियसली देर आर रिलीफ मेजर्स बट देर आर सर्टेन टैक्सेशन मेजर्स एज वेल, दैट के जो सर्विसेज के ऊपर जो कुछ सेक्टर्स के ऊपर वी ऑल नो दैट के एचआर, मैन पावर सर्विस प्रोवाइडर है, बिल्डिंग मेंटेनेंस है, एडवर्टीजमेंट्स है, उन पे सब पे 6% विदहोल्डिंग होती थी, वो 6 को बढ़ा के उन्होंने 7 कर दी है। इसी तरीके से जो मिनिमम टैक्स की रिड्यूस रेट्स एप्लीकेबल थे, तो डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स ऑफ फार्मास्यूटिकल एंड सिगरेट प्रोडक्ट्स, एफएमसीजी, एडिबल ऑयल, सीमेंट, स्टील सेक्टर, इनके जो डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स थे, अब इनकी जो मिनिमम टैक्स पहले 0.25 थी, अब वो 1.25 हो जाएगी। तो एज अ रिजल्ट ये जो नीचे डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर साइड, अब जो इनके मार्जिन ऑलरेडी जो होते हैं वो फिक्स्ड होते हैं, तब इनकी जो टैक्स लाइबिलिटी बनेगी तो दे विल पुश बैक द इंक्रीज्ड मिनिमम टैक्स लाइबिलिटी कॉस्ट टुवर्ड्स द प्रिंसिपल। सो एज अ रिजल्ट इन सेक्टर्स की जो कॉस्ट ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस है वो थोड़ी सी इंक्रीज होगी। इसी तरीके से जो फर्टिलाइजर, मोबाइल फोन की मैन्युफैक्चरर, शुगर और इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स, इनके भी जो डीलर या डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स थे उनकी मिनिमम टैक्स की रेट 0.25 थी, वो 0.5 बढ़ाई है इन्होंने। इसके अलावा जो अनलिस्टेड डेट सिक्योरिटीज के ऊपर जो आईपीएस अकाउंट्स के थ्रू इन्वेस्टमेंट्स करते थे, उसके ऊपर विदहोल्डिंग जो 15% थी वो इसको उन्होंने 20% किया है। तो टेक्निकली जो कॉर्पोरेट जो होती हैं या इंडिविजुअल्स जो हैं, अगर वो अनलिस्टेड सिक्योरिटी में आईपीएस के थ्रू इन्वेस्ट करते थे तो वो 15 थे, वो 20 कर दिए। जो लिस्टेड सिक्योरिटीज हैं वो मैं आगे एक्सप्लेन करूंगा कि वो उन्होंने लिस्टेड सिक्योरिटीज जो है वो एनसीसीपीएल के मैकेनिज्म में डाल दिए, तो वो भी टैक्स, अगर आप लिस्टेड सिक्योरिटीज में डेट मार्केट में इन्वेस्ट करके प्री मिच्योर आप विड्रॉ करेंगे तो कैपिटल गेन आ जाता है, उसको उन्होंने टैक्सेशन की है वो लिस्टेड और अनलिस्टेड को अलग अलग कर दिया है। बाकी इस बजट में बेइंतहा इन्फोर्समेंट मेजर्स लिए गए हैं, कुछ पॉजिटिव हैं, कुछ थोड़े से हार्श। जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल के पेनल्टीज हैं, उन्होंने नई पेनल्टीज इंट्रोड्यूस की हैं कि अगर कोई इलेक्ट्रॉनिक रिसोर्स या आप बिजनेसेस को इंटीग्रेट नहीं करेंगे तो उसके ऊपर नई पेनल्टीज लगाई हैं। और जो पेनल्टीज ऑलरेडी एग्जिस्ट करती हैं, जैसे आप रिटर्न लेट फाइल करें या कंप्लाइंस ऑफ ऑडिट के अंदर कुछ आप डिले करते हैं या फॉल्स या मिसलीडिंग स्टेटमेंट्स आप फाइल करते हैं, तो उसमें जो पेनल्टीज हैं उसमें तकरीबन 10 टाइम्स इसका इजाफा कर दिया गया है। एंड वी ऑल नो दैट के पेनल्टीज बड़ी जो है रेंडमली जो है वो यूज की जा रही हैं आजकल, और पेनल्टी का कॉन्सेप्ट था कि विलफुल डिफॉल्ट होना चाहिए, वो भी इन्होंने खत्म कर दिया था। तो एज अ रिजल्ट पेनल्टी बाय कॉन्सेप्ट जो है वो रेवेन्यू मेजर नहीं होता, बट दिस विल नाउ बी अनफॉर्चुनेटली यूज एज अ रेवेन्यू मेजर, एंड इसकी बहुत सिग्निफिकेंट इंक्रीज है जिसको आई थिंक रिव्यू की जरूरत है। जो एक कॉन्सेप्ट गवर्नमेंट ने अनाउंस किया है कि हम एक फेसलेस असेसमेंट का सिस्टम लेके आ रहे हैं, विच मींस दैट कि जो एफबीआर एक डेटा हब बनाएगा जिसमें सारा इंफॉर्मेशन जाएगा फ्रॉम द डिफरेंट सोर्सेज, एंड उसके बेसिस पे जो सिस्टम है एफबीआर का फेसलेस सिस्टम रन करेगा। और जो टैक्स पेयर्स होंगे पोटेंशियली जो नए जो जो टैक्स जमा ही नहीं करा रहे या अंडर डिक्लेरेशन कर रहे हैं, तो उनकी एक फेसलेस ऑडिट, असेसमेंट और इन्फोर्समेंट होगी। ये भी लास्ट ईयर इन्होंने कस्टम्स के अंदर इंट्रोड्यूस करके इसको इम्प्लीमेंट कर दिया, Now that has been introduced in the IR side, being the income tax, sales tax and FET. So we let's see that कि गवर्नमेंट इसको इम्प्लीमेंट कर पा रही है या नहीं कर पा रही। जो एक मोटी बात है वो ये कि आज तक और भी बहुत इंफॉर्मेशन एफबीआर के पास आती रही हैं, और अनफॉर्चुनेटली एफबीआर के पास इंफॉर्मेशन होने के बावजूद भी उसको वो देवर अनएबल टू कन्वर्ट दोज इंफॉर्मेशन इनटू actionable information and trying to tap those sectors which are not paying the tax. So ये बस ना हो कि ये वाला सिस्टम भी एक्चुअली एक एक डिलेइंग टैक्टिक्स ना बन जाए कहीं। तो ये एक थोड़ा सा इसमें देखने वाली बात है, बट लेट्स सी दैट, लेट्स होप दैट कि बाय कॉन्सेप्ट इट्स अ गुड मेजर। इसके अलावा रियल स्टेट में वी नो दैट के 236 जो परचेज और सेल्स के ऊपर जो रेट्स थे वो रिड्यूस कर दिए गए हैं। वेरिंग रेट्स जो हैं वो खत्म करके अब सिंगुलर रेट 1.25 और 2.75 कर दिया गया है। बाकी एनसीसीपीएल की रिजीम में एनबीएफसी एंड मुदारबास इनको ये लेके आ गए हैं कि इनका अब जो भी लिस्टेड सिक्योरिटीज में या लिस्टेड डेट मार्केट में ये अपनी इन्वेस्टमेंट करेंगे और कैपिटल गेन्स अर्न करेंगे, तो पहले ये खुद से अपने टैक्स रिटर्न्स में टैक्स जमा कराते थे। नाउ दे विल बी इन देयर टैक्स लायबिलिटी विल बी कलेक्टेड बाय द एनसीसीपीएल डायरेक्टली। इसके अलावा रिटेलर्स के ऊपर बहुत हमने सुना है कि सब जगह डिस्कशन हो रही है कि 20 करोड़ की रिटेलर्स के ऊपर जो है वो एक एक सॉर्ट ऑफ स्कीम है, फिक्स टैक्स रिजीम है, 1% टैक्स है। गवर्नमेंट का ऑब्वियसली डायरेक्टिव यह है कि लेट्स स्टार्ट फ्रॉम द स्मॉल पॉइंट एंड देन लेट्स मूव फॉरवर्ड दैट कि कम से कम उनको एक सिस्टम में लाना शुरू करें। ऑब्वियसली हमारी जो जो डॉक्यूमेंटेड सेक्टर की हमारी जो थ्योरी है दैट इज इंटायरली डिफरेंट, दैट के हर आदमी को टैक्स जो है वो कंट्रीब्यूट करना चाहिए, और ये एक सॉर्ट ऑफ गवर्नमेंट या स्टेट का रिफ्लेक्ट सम सॉर्ट ऑफ फेलियर दैट कि डिस्पाइट ऑफ ऑल दी mechanisms and the powers available with the FBI, they were unable to reach out to those retailers। अब 20 करोड़ की जो है रिटेलर्स, अब इसमें कोई चेक एंड बैलेंस कैसे लगाएंगे कि लोग स्प्लिट करके जो है वो इस टर्नओवर को मिसयूज ना करें। एक चीज जो टीयर 1 के रिटेलर्स जो आज ऑलरेडी इंटीग्रेटेड है, इनमें आज सिर्फ एफएमसीजी सेक्टर पे 0.25 है। तो अगर गवर्नमेंट उन रिटेलर्स को आगे रिलीफ दे रही है कि हम 1% दे दें आप, तो बेहतर है कि जो टीयर 1 के रिटेलर्स चाहे वो किसी भी सेक्टर में काम करते हैं, वो 0.25 उनका सब पे अप्लाई करना चाहिए। आज सिर्फ एफएमसीजी सेक्टर्स पे है, तो ये थोड़ा सा बैलेंसिंग एक्ट हो सकता है गवर्नमेंट की साइड से। इसके अलावा जो सेल्स टैक्स और एफईटी के अंदर जो है वो कुछ मेजर अमेंडमेंट्स हैं। एक अमेंडमेंट है कि अगर आपका सेल्स टैक्स आज टेक्निकली सेल के ऊपर है, बट प्रपोजल ये है कि अगर कोई माल फैक्ट्री में बन के रखा हुआ है और परचेजर इज आइडेंटिफाइड, बट अगर वो माल नहीं उठा रहा, तो फिर भी गवर्नमेंट को सेल्स टैक्स पे करना पड़ जाएगा। ये शायद प्रोबेबली इसलिए किया गया है कि इसमें कुछ सेक्टर्स के अंदर इसमें डिलेज आते थे और इंटेंशनल डिलेज होते थे जस्ट टू डिले द पेमेंट ऑफ द सेल्स टैक्स। वर्चुअली वो सेल हो जाती थी, बट वो डिलीवरी का माल नहीं उठाते थे और सेल्स टैक्स को डिले करते थे फॉर डिफरेंट रीजंस। तो दैट इज बेसिकली एन एंटी अवॉइडेंस अमेंडमेंट। इसके अलावा जो एक बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट चेंज है वो ये कि रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन अगर आज एग्जेम्प्ट सप्लाईज भी आज करता है, तो वो भी उसको भी आज जो है वो आगे से टैक्स इनवॉइस इशू करनी पड़ेगी। इसी तरीके से सेल्स टैक्स में भी पेनल्टीज बेतहाशा इंक्रीज की गई हैं। एओपीज एंड इंडिविजुअल जो हैं उनको विदहोल्डिंग एजेंट बनाएगा, विच इज़ वेरी गुड, बिकॉज कि ये एक बिल्कुल कॉर्पोरेट के अगेंस्ट में ये जो एओपीज एंड इंडिविजुअल के बिजनेसेस वर फ्लरिशिंग, और सेल्स टैक्स की विदहोल्डिंग मींस इट्स अ बिग सेविंग फॉर द अनडॉक्यूमेंटेड सेक्टर। तो दैट हैज बीन टैप्ड। लाइकवाइज टॉलर्स जो अनरजिस्टर्ड लोगों का माल बनाते हैं, जो टॉल मैन्युफैक्चरर्स हैं, उनको उनको कहा गया है कि आप जो है ना अनरजिस्टर्ड का सेल्स टैक्स खुद ही आप काट लें। इसके अलावा जो टैक्सेशन मेजर्स हैं वो ये है कि तकरीबन 21 एंट्रीज को रिटेल प्राइस बेस्ड टैक्सेशन रिजीम में डाला गया है, विच इज एक्चुअली गुड फॉर द गवर्नमेंट रेवेन्यू प्रोटेक्शन साइड, बट दैट एट द अदर साइड इट रिफ्लेक्ट्स दैट इट्स रिफ्लेक्टिंग द फेलियर ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट टू डॉक्यूमेंट द सप्लाई चेन। लाइक इसके अलावा जो लग्जरी व्हीकल्स के ऊपर 2000 सीसी के ऊपर पे 40% प्लस एक स्पेशल एक्साइज ड्यूटी लगाई गई है ऑन इम्पोर्ट। इसके अलावा जो ई सिगरेट्स के ऊपर कुछ एफईटी इनहांस की गई है। दैट्स जो एग्जेम्पशंस और कंसेशंस दिए गए हैं, ये रिफाइनरीज की बड़ी डिमांड थी, इसलिए कि उनका एक इशू जो था वो तो रिजॉल्व अभी तक नहीं हो पाया है कि उनकी जो कि गवर्नमेंट जो है वो मतलब जो पेट्रोलियम प्रोडक्ट्स पे पेट्रोलियम ले भी ले रही है, तो सेल्स टैक्स उन्होंने एग्जाम किया हुआ। इनका मेन डिमांड तो ये थी कि उनकी एग्जाम्पशंस जो है वो खत्म की जाए, और ताकि इनकी जो इनपुट्स है वो पास ऑन हो सके। बट ये उसका एक कॉन्सिक्वेंशियल बेनिफिट दे दिया कि अगर आप रिफाइनरीज अपग्रेडेशन करेंगी तो उनकी प्लांट एंड मशीनरी की इंपोर्ट के ऊपर सेस टैक्स नहीं लगेगा, तो जो कि एक्चुअली उनकी बहुत बड़ी डिमांड थी, ये जो इन्होंने पूरी की है। इसके अलावा ये टैंकर्स एंड ड्रेजर, तो ये शिपिंग साइट से रिलेटेड एक बड़ी रिलीफ है कि इनकी इंपोर्ट्स के ऊपर जो है वो सेस टैक्स नहीं लगेगा। बाकी जो ईवी गाड़ियों के ऊपर जो एग्जम्पशंस थी उनको थोड़ा सा एक्सटेंड किया गया है। 1% जो सेस टैक्स थी ईवी मैन्युफैक्चर जो फोर व्हीलर्स पे थी, और इसी तरीके से जो ईवी ट्रक्स हैं उन पे भी सेल्स टैक्स, जो बसेस ईवी के ऊपर थी उनके ऊपर ऑलरेडी 1% था, तो बसेस के ऊपर भी उन्होंने आगे इसको एक्सटेंड किया है। इसके अलावा जो क्लब और बिजनेस क्लास ट्रेवल्स हैं उनके ऊपर जो है वो उन्होंने एफईडी को सिग्निफिकेंटली रिड्यूस किया है। अब जो मैं कुछ दो स्लाइड्स हैं मेरी, 2-5 मिनट दूंगा कि वो ये इश्यूज हैं जो कि अगर गवर्नमेंट एड्रेस करती तो थोड़ा और इसमें रिलीफ मिल जाता। कुछ ऐसे पॉइंट्स हैं जो कि रेवेन्यू न्यूट्रल है या गवर्नमेंट के रेवेन्यू इंक्रीज भी कर सकते हैं। जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल के डिस्क्रिशनरी पावर्स हैं कि टू रिजेक्ट दी ओन एस्टिमेट। सब कॉर्पोरेट्स को पता होगा कि अगर हम एडवांस टैक्स हम जमा कराते हैं और ओन एस्टिमेट के साथ जमा कराते हैं तो कमिश्नर के पास पावर है कि वो उसको रिजेक्ट कर देते हैं और इमीडिएटली रिकवरी भी कर जाता है। तो दैट पावर वाज सपोज एंड ऑट टू बी रिव्यूड, एंड दिस इसको अगर गवर्नमेंट बेहतर होता कि इसको इसको रिव्यू करके थोड़ा सा मॉडिफाई कर लेती। इसी तरीके से 122(5)(a) को रेंडमली यूज किया जाता है, उसको भी जो है वो गवर्नमेंट अपना जो है वो रिव्यू कर सकती है विदाउट एनी रेवेन्यू लॉस। इसी तरीके से जो पेनल्टीज एंड प्रोसिक्यूशन के प्रोविजंस हैं वो अनफॉर्चुनेटली रिसेंटली अभी आपने देखे फिजिकल लॉज में कि वो डायरेक्टली पहले पेनल्टीज एंड प्रोसिक्यूशन से स्टार्ट करते हैं और उसके बाद टैक्स असेसमेंट होती है। तो सॉर्ट ऑफ ये टैक्स लॉस जो है वो एक क्रिमिनल लॉस बनते जा रहे हैं कि मतलब यू आर गिल्टी अनलेस प्रूवन इनोसेंट। तो ये थोड़ा सा इसमें गवर्नमेंट में कॉन्सेप्चुअल चेंज करने की जरूरत है फिजिकल लॉज में, कि पेनल्टीज के जो प्रोविजंस हैं वो इस तरह अप्लाई ना किए जाएं। इसी तरीके से रिफंड्स की बहुत बड़ा इशू है कॉर्पोरेट्स का, और रिफंड्स जो है वो जनरली जब तक एफबीआर का ऑफिसर रिफंड ऑर्डर पास करके एडजस्टमेंट ना दे वी कांट एडजस्ट द रिफंड्स। तो ये एक रिक्वेस्ट थी या डिमांड थी हमारी पूरी पीबीसी की तरफ से भी कि जो रिफंड ऑर्डर्स हैं 60 डेज के बाद ऑटोमेटिकली अवेलेबल हो जाए सिस्टम पे फॉर एडजस्टमेंट। इसी तरीके से कुछ डॉक्यूमेंटेशन के ऊपर जैसे सजेशन थी कि ट्रांसपोर्ट सेक्टर से वी ऑल नो दैट के टैक्स नहीं आता, तो जो पैसेंजर और गुड ट्रांसपोर्ट व्हीकल्स हैं इनके ऊपर रजिस्ट्रेशन के ऊपर आज कोई टैक्स नहीं है, और उनके आगे भी जो टैक्सेशन है वो बड़ी ही रिड्यूस्ड है। तो इस सेक्टर को टैप करने की जरूरत थी। इसी तरीके से एग्रीकल्चर इनकम का बहुत मिसयूज किया जाता है, और बहुत सारी ऐसी एक्टिविटीज हैं जो बाजाहिर लगती हैं वो एग्रीकल्चर एक्टिविटीज बट है नहीं। तो जो एग्रीकल्चर प्रोड्यूस के ऊपर जो सर्टिफिकेट है उसको डिजिटाइज करने की जरूरत है। और इसी तरीके से एग्रीकल्चर इनकम ऑल्दो प्रोविंशियल सब्जेक्ट है, बट एफबीआर या हमारा फेडरल का कानून जो है वो उस पर पाबंदी लगाए कि वो वेल स्टेटमेंट जमा कर रहे हैं। वो लोग जो प्रोविंस में एग्रीकल्चर इनकम टैक्स देते हैं वो फेडरल में वेल स्टेटमेंट जरूर जमा कराएं, सो दैट की विजिबिलिटी। अदरवाइज एग्रीकल्चर इनकम से जो एसेट्स निकल के आ रहे हैं वो आज किसी जो है वो डॉक्यूमेंट का पार्ट नहीं बन रहे। तो ये इसके अलावा जो एक इस पे मेरा एक पॉइंट ये था कि जो एओपीज का जो है वो कॉन्सेप्ट ये बहुत ज्यादा मिसयूज हो रहा है। तो इसमें भी गवर्नमेंट को चाहिए था कि अगर एओपीज के अंदर कॉमन बेनिफिशियल ओनरशिप है तो उस पर अगर एक एनटीएन अलॉट कर दे, तो जो आज जो अनडॉक्यूमेंटेड सेक्टर बेतहाशा एओपीज के कॉन्सेप्ट पे काम कर रहा है। और इसके अलावा जो सेक्टर्स टू फोकस है, तो ये मैंने कुछ सेक्टर्स आइडेंटिफाई किए हैं कि अगर जो फेसलेस असेसमेंट का आ रहा है तो फर्स्ट राउंड में इन सेक्टर्स को फोकस करने की जरूरत है। जैसे कंस्ट्रक्शन है, कमोडिटी ट्रेडिंग है, एंटरटेनमेंट है, टूर ऑपरेटर्स हैं, हॉस्पिटैलिटी का बिजनेस है, एजुकेशन है, हॉस्पिटल्स हैं, एग्री बेस्ड बिजनेसेस हैं ये, और ट्रांसपोर्टर्स हैं। यहाँ से अगर गवर्नमेंट अपना ये जो नया प्रोजेक्ट है, क्योंकि इन एरियाज के अंदर बेतहाशा जो है हमारी अनडॉक्यूमेंटेड इकोनॉमी काम कर रही है और यहाँ फोकस करने की जरूरत है। तो ये मेरी कुछ तजावीज़ थी जो कि अगर गवर्नमेंट चाहे तो इसको जो है अपना बजट के अंदर इसको एड्रेस करती तो थोड़ा और इसमें जो है वो डॉक्यूमेंटेड सेक्टर और जो टैक्स पेइंग सेक्टर्स हैं उसमें थोड़ा सा रिलीफ मिलता। सो थैंक यू वेरी मच एंड जावेद साहब ओवर टू यू।
आसिफ साहब, थैंक यू सो मच जी, दैट वाज फैंटास्टिक। अगर आप इजाजत दें, मेरे पास रिक्वेस्ट आई है, लोग आपकी प्रेजेंटेशन मांग रहे हैं, तो अगर आप कंफर्टेबल हैं तो
प्लीज।
मैं आपकी प्रेजेंटेशन मेंबर्स के साथ शेयर करूंगा। और अगर उनके कोई स्पेसिफिक सवाल हैं तो perhaps they can call you or they can email you. But thank you very much, ji. I thought that was fantastic, very clear and very, very useful. So much appreciated, ji. Let's move on, ji, now to some of our speakers. Our first economist is Dr. Mozim Mahmood, who is a great friend of mine, a mentor of mine. I've known him for over 40 years. He's a professor of economics at the Lahore School of Economics, and he heads the modeling lab at the ITC. He formerly served as the director of research at the International Labour Organization. So over to you, Dr. Mozim.
I beg your pardon. Can you hear me now?
Ji, bilkul.
Sorry, I was muted earlier. Assalamu alaikum, ji. Javed, thank you for having the law school and for having me. And indeed, we are old friends. And Asif Saab, what a fantastic analysis of the tax structure and the regulatory structure. It was a privilege to listen to that. Dr. Saiba spoke about the aims of the PBC earlier. I want to address, Javed, if I may, most of your discussants and your panelists are going to be talking about the budget. Fair enough. This is what we are here for. And the budget is supposed to give us a set of incentives and regulatory structures to affect the economy. I'm here today largely to speak to the economy. Your job is the regulatory structures and the incentive structures. My job is to analyze what is observed in the corpus of the economy. Give me 30 seconds to introduce to you the context in which I'm going to be doing this. I teach a course called Modeling General Equilibrium. Fancy stuff. What it is it is teaching our kids how to model an economy or a group of economies. I believe it is a rare product, not just in Pakistan, but also outside, because I have spent a lot of my time in this area and I know the academic networks. And believe me, modeling is supposed to be a closed door, black box set of structures which are only relied upon by the IMF and UNDESA and the ADB and the ECB. So we thought that we would actually teach our kids at the Lahore School what modeling is about, and that not only would we teach them the theory, but we would teach them how to model. That said, the second point in my context is that we run a small modeling lab. The manager of our modeling lab, Amna Noor, is also one of the panelists today. What we do is we model the Pakistani economy, which means that we estimate the size of the economy, we estimate its change between 2 points in time, we look at the drivers of growth of the economy. We also then look at pricing structures, we look at sectoral structures, and all that works in. is baked into the model. We also encourage that our students should not think just about Pakistan, but also think of themselves as part of the global economy. And thinking is not just wishing, but to be able to model the global economy. I used to wear another hat a few years ago. I've now returned to Pakistan, whereby I was modeling employment. I'm now modeling output and employment here in Pakistan. But we are also modeling the EU. So we are offering advice to the ECB and to multilaterals on policy changes, on interest rate changes, on employment regulatory structure changes, of how we take the European Union and the European Euro area. We are also modeling Asia, and we are encouraged in that by multilaterals who are not our clients, but a part of our academic network. So it is very much the WTO and my former organization, the ILO, and a couple of others who are coming in. We are also modeling for bilaterals. So we are starting work in Cambodia, in Malaysia, and as I said, parts of the Asian economy. Now, to Pakistan. The good news is the bad news. The good news is that the Pakistan economy, we think, over financial year 25-26, from July 25 to June 26, haje 2 mahine reh gaye ne, but till June 26, these are unobserved values and therefore projected values. We estimate that GDP growth has been, real growth, has been 2.9%. Let's compare this to a couple of other, we've got a couple of other comparators. The closest it comes to is the bank. The World Bank estimates it at 3%. And IMF, of course, is slightly higher at 3.5. GOP, of course, is very optimistic at 3.7. And ADB also is somewhere down nearer our estimate. We think that it may appear on first blush to be bad news, but it is actually good news, because this is an energy shocked economy. There has been a global energy shock in the last 4 months, and the Pakistan economy, which imports 0.5 million barrels per day of oil, 80% of which comes through the Straits of Hormuz, which has elevated oil prices by approximately on average $30. So this oil shock gives us an enhanced energy bill of 1.35 billion. And it is this oil shock which is going to lower our baseline growth from 2.9%. When all the bills are paid for the last 2 months, as I said, these are projected values for May and June. But when these are factored in by GOP itself and by us, then we will find that we fear that GDP growth will drop by about 0.5%. So we're talking about a growth rate of dropping from 2.9% to 2.4%. However, let us be optimistic. Let's return to how this economy has been besieged. I'm not throwing up a lot of numbers because people tend to get glassy-eyed. I would have liked to do that, but maybe on another occasion, Javed, if I may. If you look at the impact of the global energy shock, you can see it clearly in the current account. Now, the current account normally, and I'm noticing that Dr. Saiba was talking about a export-led policy, and we wish that was so. Unfortunately, our exports are pretty inelastic. And there, if you look at the month-by-month current account, they sort of vary around 3.5 billion a month. Now, imports hang around 6 to 6.5 billion a month. The moment imports verge on 7 billion a month, our current account goes into deficit. I know that GOP and we also love to talk up remittances, but please be wary of remittances. They're a God's gift. We do not control remittances. They are controlled by exogenous factors, as we say. So, leaving aside remittances, which give us a bailout, the whole point is that we end up running into a current account deficit. And if you note that a little bit of good news coming in around February, March, and then the current account hit, the global energy shock hit, and our current account again went into a deficit under $500 million. And those bills will have to be paid for May and June, which is why we fear that the lower GDP estimate may be the better one, but I'm offering you both the baseline and a fearful one of a drop of 0.5% of GDP growth. If we move to what has led this growth, as opposed to what has dampened it down, sectoral growth we just take as read. GOP tells us that agricultural growth has picked up to about 2.9%, and we are happy with that. However, we do note that that agricultural growth has been below trend over 23-24 and 24-25, and part of it has been an own goal because GOP dropped agricultural support prices, and in the last 2 years, when large-scale manufacturing was contracting or barely stagnant, that was a silly policy because of the fact that this was the only golden goose. So when you drop agricultural support prices, and I'm not taking a position on it, I'm just observing the impact on nominal levels, the crop sector's nominal growth dropped in nominal terms. And thank God that they have restored, of course, it affected agricultural incomes. And thank God they have restored agricultural crop prices so that hopefully now with the Rabi crop, agricultural growth is kicking in. There is supposed to be good news on large-scale manufacturing. I have been single-handedly worrying myself to death about it. And I invited Dr. Ishrat, our great colleague and participant at our annual Lahore School conference, to come and talk to this. And he certainly knows the economy far better than I do. But he reckons that the pickup in growth now, and we are being told by the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, that the last quarter 3, which is the observed quarter for FY 25-26, large-scale manufacturing picked up to 6%. However, annually, we still project it at about 4.5%. And we also note that services has picked up. Fair enough. We take all that. We bake it into the model. And we find that should have given us decent growth. However, the problem was that the global energy shock hit. The next point I want to make is the impact of the global energy shock on inflation. Now, this may sound like a no-brainer, but when we actually model it, we find that inflation last year was about 8%, and this year we fear it is picking up to 9%. And the major contributor in our in our inflation model, the largest ticket item is the import of commodities. And this high ticket item has risen from under 3% to about 4.6%. Now, why that is so is very clear. If we look at our energy equations, you look at the change in the price of 7 major forms of energy, we find that the change to the consumer, so the bill to consumer, petrol price has risen 54%, kerosene 85%, high-speed diesel 53%, electricity 24%, almost 25%, coal 8%, natural gas 126%, furnace oil 33%. We take these nominal changes, multiply them by the energy mix weights, and this gives us an increase, a weighted average increase in energy costs of 8.9, let's say 9%. And then we factor this into our price model through a transmission mechanism, which basically then gives us a major inflationary big ticket item, which is the increase in commodity prices. I cannot leave without adding the caveat that all of this is not the energy shock, that this 8.9% increase in commodity prices and its pass through to inflation has been in large part a GOP own goal, because the increase in supplier prices are 35% only of this, whereas the share of tax changes, and I'm sure Asif Saab is the better senior expert on this, has been 58%. So while we acknowledge and we all flag wave that we must raise taxes and the tax base, but I must warn you that the other side of the sword is it is cutting into the consumer. So, Javed, let me end by looking at the impact of growth, inflation, the energy shock on welfare. And the best way to examine welfare is to look at who are the poor. The only decent estimate of poverty in Pakistan can be given by a household income expenditure survey, which was conducted over 2018-19. And now we have a comparator in financial year 24-25. And the methodology that we use is the World Bank's POVCalNet. It's got a new acronym now. And their methodology for extreme poverty comes in at $3. This can be translated into purchasing power parity. And this gives us, for 2018-19, we have re-estimated that poverty was 16.5% of the total population. Before I give you the most recent number, let me point out that until 2018-19, poverty was falling for the last near 2 decades or flatlined at about, and this is a different set of goalposts, so because it was a different methodology, but we made them comparable. But poverty was flatlined, and then it jumps up to 16%. So there's a reversal. Now in 24-25, a period of 5 years, poverty has risen by another 5%, from 16% to 21%. So this is a considerable shock. And while we laud the stabilization program, and we know that we must balance our budgets, we must balance them exogenously, we must balance them domestically. However, we have to note that low growth and high inflation have shamefully raised poverty by 5% over 5 years. Having said that, I wish to acknowledge the current political dispensation. I'm not playing favorites here, that they have managed to control inflation because it was riding at 33%. And we have our inflation model shows that the major contributor to inflation has been depreciation of the exchange rate. From 2018-19, there was a huge depreciation of 25%. Then in 22-23, another depreciation of 40%. And these, regardless of whatever else flag waving they may have done, and Javed, we can talk about their impact on growth at another time, because I have decidedly different views than some of your other economists on the panel on depreciation. In my view, it has been a disaster. Certainly, the evidence I'm presenting to you is that they peaked inflation, and it was therefore low growth, high inflation, and that led to the major reversal in poverty reduction that Pakistan had seen from 2000 onwards. So a mixed bag of results. However, we are optimists. We think, inshallah, that GOP will do better, guided by you, guided by your panel, guided by the eminent economists here. We are simply warning that while GOP has contained inflation, much to its credit, it has weathered the oil shock. It has got a remarkably resilient exchange rate, and we have an exchange rate model, and we can discuss that at some other time as well, Javed. We think that GOP must up its growth game. That perhaps is where I should stop, and maybe we can pick up on questions later. Thank you, Javed, and thank you for inviting the school and myself and our lab here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mozel. That was just fantastic. And I think you've provoked us. So there's lots to think about and lots to talk about, especially around the exchange rate. That was very interesting. Let's move on to Dr. Saab, Dr. Ikramul Haq Saab. You are very well known. Everyone knows you. So welcome. Thank you. I'm personally a big admirer of yours. I read everything that you write. So it's really great to have you. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Javed Saab, for these words of appreciation. And I am grateful to PBC that they have invited me to exchange my views with you, eminent people here. I will just contain myself to constitutional political economy and the kinds of taxes they impose. I'm highly critical of the way, first of all, the tax proposals are processed in Pakistan, because it is unfortunate that only people sitting in FPR, having no idea of what constitution is and or many other things, they just propose these things and they are kept very secret. In UK, they release 2 months before. There are a lot of debate and then they decide. Even in India, now they take about 2 months to see what kind of proposals, and general public as well as experts, they are invited and they give their input. But in Pakistan, I have failed to understand why they keep it secret till the last time. What is their anxiety is, except that some sale tax rates can lead to some kind of malpractices in or imperfect markets. But otherwise, as far as corporate income tax is concerned or personal income taxation is concerned, what is the harm that you give your proposal to the public before, and we have a lot of discussion on that, and then parliamentarian has have no role in it at all, because they don't even read, to my understanding, what finance bill is, and there is little discussion informed on that. General remarks are always there, but how you can read highly technical, legal, old jargons, and our laws are now largely outdated, because the way they were written many years back are no more desirable in even the countries from where, and rather one country from where we inherited it, the old colonial masters. So first of all, we should at least raise these questions at our forums, because these things are hardly discussed or coming in any discourse, which is quite strange. Because this is not prerogative of FPR revenue crazy to tell us what kind of fiscal policy or philosophy of fiscal policy go. When you give them targets, they have only one aim, how to achieve that, and they hardly achieve that. And if they achieve them in very bad way. So the only my prime objection is that there is a target giving system somehow whenever we are in IMF program, and always we are in IMF program except for a very short period of time. And what they do, they say, okay, you have collected this money, now let us apply your inflation rate, then let us make your own claim of growth rate and 2-3% your own effort. What kind of methodology is it? First of all, their numbers are always fight up because they don't issue refunds which are actually determined. So they are always actually telling us that this amount is collected, but that is payable. So there is no double entry system there. You never know. And if we are even stopped now giving basic information that what sector has paid what. So after this Article 19A, which gives you right to information, they have reversed it in a very bad manner. Earlier, they used to tell us this kind of returns have come, what traders are actually contributing, but they have stopped doing that. Even tax expenditure is now very not very elaborate as it was earlier, or tax trajectory. Maybe we are not very happy with tax trajectory, but at least public information should be there, and they don't give it any information now. So FPR as a whole now has become an extractive body, and they are always levying taxes in a manner which are not desirable in any civilized society, what to talk of any functional democratic setup. And obviously, we have them to blame, not them, but to Parliament at least, because this is their job to make laws and make laws according to the aspirations of the people and not at the behest of revenue crazy, which I call them, because they have their own mindsets. And if you talk to them, then always they come up with the allegations that people of Pakistan don't pay tax. Well, the reality is that every adult who is using mobile is paying advance adjustable income tax of 15%. And today, if we take data from Pakistan authorities, we will find that it is in public, domain now, that there are 150 million people are using broadband facility. And this is unique, obviously. We are not talking about 3-4 SIMs used by one person. So with this kind of taxation where you are taking money from everyone and then you are blaming that they don't file return, how many people should out of these 150 million file return? We have no idea. Who's earning, according to them, 600,000 rupees is such a difficult thing to know, because all of us know that if Pakistani has 50 million household, what is the income earning level is. So I'm highly dejected now that at all forums we just talk about numbers or we just talk about rate of taxes and everything, but the fundamental issues have never been touched or discussed. Therefore, they have taken a command that only in this country the right to levy taxes, not with the parliament, but with the IMF and now with revenue tracing. So this is my first impression that I want to share with you, that this is not the way that Constitution so desires. Constitution is very clear, but how we can say that you can, after so much withholding taxes, you say these are minimum taxes. What is minimum tax? I haven't heard in any country that there is some kind of minimum tax. People have presumptive taxation, right? I'm aware of that. We started in 1991 with presumptive taxations and saying that we are not in a position to actually tax actual income of people. Traders came and they said, okay, if you take presumptive taxation from us, we are happy. So whole judgment of Supreme Court that justified that taxation in Pakistan said that since net income taxation is not possible in Pakistan. Look at the state is saying it is not possible, and the highest court was saying yes, it is correct that we can't do that. So better we say that the amount of import is your income, the amount of supplies is your income. So these kind of aberration we did. But they found a way to justify it under the Constitution that says that either you can tax net income or you can provide in lieu of that. Here I would like that we must underline this word, in lieu of that, any kind of capacity tax. So they said, okay, these are all capacity tax. Although capacity taxation was altogether a different thing, but they made these kind of jurisprudence which was unique in the world, I think. So what happened? And then they started raising the rates. When this was done for the first time, rates were like 2-3%. They now have 15% rate of tax, as Haroon Saab was telling us, Asif Haroon Saab was telling us, on service sector, for example. And they say this is minimum. What does it mean? It's very strange. Either you can say that whole of your receipt is presumptive, so we are charging some percentage on that. And then if a province is charging you on your services at 15-16%, what is the difference between gross taxation by them and this minimum taxation by the federation? So nobody is aware or want to talk about the constitutionality of taxes in Pakistan, which is very strange. I know that Constitution reserved very little respect in Pakistan, and a lot of the times we have unconstitutional regimes. Even civilians, whenever they are ruling, they have little respect for the Constitution. But how you can justify this? Either you can have presumptive taxation, okay, or you can have net income tax. But in between, can you use the both that you are saying this is minimum, but if your income is more than that, then we will charge you the net income tax rate? This is highly unconstitutional. Even the court, when they said that you can do this, they made it very clear that you will not have resort to both the entries then. If you opted once that you will go for capacity tax, then you will not come back to net income basis and vice versa. But now they are using both since 2019, when Shabar Zaidi Saab came as chairman, he did that. And nobody raised any question about that till today. I wonder what kind of tax experts and constitutional experts we are. So my first objection is that I don't think that this should be tolerated anymore. And I think we should all take up this matter that you cannot apply both to us. Either go for presumptive taxation, which was 1% for exports. Okay, that was fine. But now what is this that you are saying? We will have both methods for you. This is minimum for you, and this will not return to you. Whatever we have taken from you, 1.25 or whatever, at the time of export proceed, 1% was earlier, it was good, because then there were no net income taxation. But now they are saying that we will charge you 29% plus. of course, 8% now, and many other taxes like workers' welfare and worker. So if I have to pay like 60% as taxation, whatever you name, maybe it's a levy or whatever, in the end, it is charged on your income. Then how you will export, how you will make new investment? So if state wants to tell us once for all that for the next 10 years, we want to tax you at 60%, so then I can make up my mind whether I should do this business or not. What should I do in this country where they are explicitly telling me that your tax rate is now 60%? Decide whether you want to. If FBR is doing this, 60% if they want to tax exporter, I don't think how things are debated in Pakistan. So it's not the micro management by the state. It's not the function of the state to see that we are dealing with this sector, we are dealing with that sector. One sector they say we are running the economy, give us zero rate. The others goes and says, I am the backbone of the economy. This is not how the states run. You can say this is our 10-year tax policy or 5-year if you say you are elected for 5 years. And then people should decide whether they want to do a particular business or they don't want to do a particular business. But here, there are so many discriminations. Now, traders are saying we will just pay 1% of turnover or 25,000. What kind of this taxation is? That they will pass on 1% on me? Already, when they are paying taxes on their electricity bills, do you think they are paying that taxes from their pocket? They are passing it on us. So practically, they are not paying any tax then. But on the other hand, corporate is paying so much tax that now we have deindustrialization in Pakistan. So how we can put this taxation effects in our economic models is highly questionable to me. When we don't understand the incidence of tax, where the incidence of tax is in Pakistan. Perhaps no economist can tell me, or if they want to have a long discussion with me, I am always available. Hardly we understand the tax structures of Pakistan, so how we can put them into our economic models? This is very strange. And then secondly, they were saying that we are going for digitization, we are going for documentation. Then you are taking these one very major supply chain out of that and saying you are not subjected to audit, you are not subjected to digitization, you don't POS, you just go away and just pay us 1%, and our total amount which we expect from you is only 50 billion rupees. What is the real tax potential of the traders in this, this sector where you say is retail only, or if you say wholesale, or you say distribution as well? Where is the study for that? I want to see that. Have FBR that study ever made? Any economist, any university, any college, any think tank? So if we have large informal economy and they want to actually encourage informal economy further and further with their policies, and they want to kill growth and they want to kill formal sector, it's okay, then they should tell us in clear words that this is our policy, this is our fiscal philosophy, you do whatever you want to do. So my concern is that now they want to say that we will have this AI-based things, faceless and other things. I know India did it in 2019. After 80% of their payments were through digital mode, even a beggar was taking through QR code some amount. But now we have huge cash economy, and there you are saying that we will have these kind of AI-based audit and assessments. Again, I don't understand what they want to tell us. And in the same breath, they are telling us that we have taken these traders out of the system. What kind of self-contradictions these are? And nobody is there to ask them what you are talking about. When finance minister, in his speech saying that we have a scheme for them, they tell the people this is an amnesty scheme for them. They are powerful. They give money to some political, whatever their crowd is, I don't want to go into detail. But what kind of discrimination is this? And they keep on passing all kinds of burdens on consumers. So these are fundamental questions we should keep in mind. Where is the taxpayer's bill of right? Obviously, there's a human bias when they say they are doing order to human beings. But how we will know that technological base, hidden formulas, who will decipher that? Taxpayers, their tax advisors, judges. Already, when they make these tax returns every year, they have new tax returns format. This time, very long, 45 or whatever pages. I don't want to actually even remember that. But other countries like Canada, Europeans, even they send you your own return. But say 1 or 2 page return is there. That's okay. But you are saying, though, we will have this long return and you fill it for us. Tell us what kind of jewelry your wife has. What kind of nonsense this is? Nobody is having your wealth statement anywhere. If Pakistan has such a large issues of non-declaration of wealth, it's not the income taxation issue then. Go and make a crime agency like UK, and if people are making untaxed wealth, or if even people are creating some mess, go and after them and punish them under penal laws or prosecute them. But why you are asking compliant taxpayer every year to fill all these nonsense details? So they are increasing burden. So why withholding agents do work on their behalf as a forced labor without any compensation? So the whole tax system is such disgusting that I don't want to discuss clause by clause or rate by rate and other things. And I will just stop here, and I will once again express my great rejection with the direction where we are going. Rather than improving in the name of reform and other things, we are actually increasing the burden of the people and pushing the inflation through these nonsensical taxes. Thank you very much.
Dr. Saab, that was extremely stimulating and provocative. Thank you very much for your thoughts. Lots to think about there, and definitely some further discussions I think are necessary. Last but not least, we have young Dr. Ali Hasanain, who is, I think, one of the brightest young economists in the country. It's a real pleasure to have him with us. I read everything he says. I've become good friends with him. So look forward to hearing from you, Ali. Over to you. You're on.
Can you see my slide deck?
Yep.
Right, great. Thank you for that. And it's a pleasure to follow on from Ikram Saab's very sort of passionate and on-the-point comments, because it also sort of echoes some things that I've come to believe about the economy. He talked a lot about the tax structure, but I think, and a lot of, I guess, the thrust, Ikram Saab, that I took from you was that this is sort of a design without systematic or policy level thinking. And I think that is something that also sits exactly in line with how I think about most economic plans. So if you think about what it is that Pakistan's economy suffers from over and over, this is something that we don't really have institutions whose job it is to ensure that Pakistan is well informed about the economy from a full spectrum, let's say, perspective. And so it is left to my institution or your institution at PBC to provide partial analysis, I guess. This is really analysis that should happen at the Planning Commission level, perhaps, or other government institutions, or even government finance think tanks. But because there's that vacuum, PBC is very transparent about your lobbying interests. And so there's a particular position that you're coming from. Our problem as LUMS is that our primary mission is teaching. And so that leaves very little time to really put into doing the type of analysis that the country needs. So, but it's our job, I guess, collectively for civil society to think about these things. And sort of, it's heartening to see BBC hold these events and engage broadly. So I'm going to speak about a quarter of my time I'm going to allocate to the budget, and the rest of it I'm going to set up the perspective and give you my thoughts on why or how we should assess the budget. And so let me just quickly skim over where we stand. This is GDP per capita relative to peer countries. We all know that we've been left behind. If you can add China to this, you can add South Korea to this. We know the story. And we also know that we tax very little relative to peer countries. And that, to me, is a binding constraint compared to anything else that we're going to talk about. Having taken Ikram Saab's point about, you don't know who you're putting the burden on, that was very well taken. But just the amount that we're taxing relative to GDP is not high. I have a view, and Mohsen Saab referenced it. We can talk more about it in a minute. But we often hear on the news that we're not exporting enough. And then we say that we're importing too much, so we should cut down on luxuries and this and that. I don't have that graph here, but if you were to plot the same thing, this is exports as a percentage of GDP. Exports is very low relative to our peers. But if you also plot imports, imports are actually very much in line with the rest. So it's not imports that are the problem, it is exports. And our human development trails the region. This is life expectancy. And in life expectancy, Pakistan was the second highest in South Asia in 1960 and is currently the second lowest. And more sort of worryingly, that decline has been very gradual and sustained. And so the question that one has to ask is, what's wrong with a governance system that should be seeing this data and doesn't react to it? And you see the same pattern in education and in income per capita and things. There's a stagnancy that you have to explain. So it's the headline numbers. Actually, I'll show this with graphs. That will be easier later. So the good news is that there has been this stabilization moment that other speakers have also referenced. This is just inflation over time, and we all know that we've come down from our peak. We also know that we are currently seeing higher inflation than in the last few months. Some of the month-on-month, the sort of year-on-year by month numbers that we are seeing are simply because the corresponding months last year were at the end of a high base. So essentially, inflation was very low this time last year. And so the comparison is why inflation is being seen as high. So what we need to see over the next few months is whether that sustains or not. And as you know, we need to keep an eye on the energy supply chain, on fertilizer, and the downstream effect on agricultural output. So that's something to watch. And yesterday's State Bank decision on the interest rate was in line with that expectation of slightly higher inflation this year. Manufacturing is recovering, but sort of my concern with manufacturing is that we're not really let's say, reorienting businesses to more sustainable patterns. And I have more to say about this if you want later. The one graph that I would worry about after education in Pakistan is perhaps investments. And that is still just extremely depressing. I have a graph elsewhere that shows that Pakistan has the lowest investments to GDP of any Asian country. And our gap to the average Asian country on the downside is as much as China's gap to the average Asian country on the upside, on the savings rate and the investment rate. And I don't have it here perhaps, but there's a almost one-to-one relationship between the investment rate and the savings rate. And again, this is something that has been true for more than 30 years, and there's just no serious policy making around it. So we're seeing investment is slightly up from the flow that we recently had, but it's really nothing. And we've tried to struggle through it. The government, in its wisdom, has decided to create the SIFC, and the before and after investment rate hasn't moved. So there is this requirement to think of investments not just in terms of investments the way you and I do, in terms of firms or in terms of individual investments, but at the macroeconomic level. And to understand it and to work on it, a lot of it is down to government saving. And this is something that isn't well understood and hasn't changed year on year. The other really scary thing is the demographics, where 2/3 of Pakistan, as you know, is below the age of 30. But as I'll show you in a second, we just have a massive employment problem. So the good news is that there's been slight change on some factors. You've seen transport and wholesale increasing, people employed by a little bit, but both manufacturing, which is practically zero, and on the agriculture sector, you're seeing a massive decrease in employment share. But this is really the one that I would, if you take one graph away, I think it would be this. So the blue bar here is number of working age people, and the orange bar is the employed people, right? So partially that is because Pakistan is one of the rare countries in the world where women are almost completely shut out of employment. We have one of the lowest women's labor force participation rates in the world, but it's also because there is a significant chunk. I don't have this disaggregated by gender, but if I did, you'd see a significant chunk of employable men are unemployed at the moment, and the gap, as you can see, in the last 5 years has increased. And this is an increase that cannot be plugged by individual sectors. So it's not like you're going to subsidize or you're going to protect an industry and you'll employ 10,000 or 100,000 more people and you'll plug this gap. We've added 20 million people to the labor force in the last 5 years, right? And even if we argue that 10 million have seen an increase in employment in net terms, that's just not enough growth. So until you fix the broken growth model, this is something that keeps me up awake at night, and which is also why I think that the budget is a bad sort of point around which to situate our attention. It's, budget, you need to think about wholesale architectural changes, not short-term allocation changes. And there have been studies in the last 15 years on how much Pakistan has to grow to absorb the labor force. But that absorption also we need to think about, because there's been a change in the capacity of different sectors to absorb the labor force. This really needs more attention than it ever gets. And as you can see on the right side, unemployment is also increasing. The income game in terms of so we're seeing a growth rate, and the government one of the early summaries of good news that the government came out with talked about the increase in the GDP per capita in dollar terms. And a large chunk of that is simply because of missing devaluation. If you calculate according to real equals 100, the gap comes down a lot. And due to prices. So this is something that I can get into later if you want. Let me go on to looking at the budget a little bit. And so there are 4 margins that we want to think about the budget at. One is revenue, how much we are raising. The second is how much we are leaking. The third is our pre-committed interest payments. And the fourth is how the allocations between the center and provinces are architectured. So in terms of revenue, half of the revenue increase that we're seeing is simply because compared to a couple of years ago, the state bank is earning more interest on the loans, right? And so that is just a marker of the unstable moment that we were in earlier. And as we're stabilizing and the interest rate is winding down a little bit, this non-tax blue bar that you're seeing will shrink. And so what we really need to be thinking about is actual tax improvements, and that hasn't happened yet to a significant degree. The second is leaks, and here we're seeing that subsidies have shrunk significantly from their 2021-22 moment, but are actually higher than the year before that. So you can put 2021-22 down to very sort of a confluence of very special things. There was the back end of COVID, there was the political instability, there was, of course, the energy subsidy leading into because of the political instability also. But the bottom line is that we are still subsidizing at 7% of revenue, right? It's a large chunk of subsidies that we're giving. And this is more wonkish perhaps, but it's saying that there is still significant exemptions. And so part of what we need to be thinking about as an economy is to have as balanced a playing field between different parts of the economy as possible in terms of how much government shows up for them, because that is when decisions will be made efficiently in allocations across sectors. So the national tariff policy was the big sort of story leading up to the budget. There have been tariff cuts in the budget, but also there are exemptions that have been built in. I'm currently doing a study on this. So I don't have final picture from this to share yet, but provisionally, it seems like the national tariff policy will have a limited success, and then a lot of the intended outcomes will be undercut by by the system, let's say, rebalancing. The great news is that stability was important because we were paying at peak 61% of every tax rupee collected in interest payments. And we've gone down from that to 40 and hopefully 35% of revenue soon. And so bringing this down further is important. I note with some concern sort of the increase in volume around government needs to push growth now, precisely because until it makes it fixes the leaks in the system, what will then happen is that we'll go right up back where we came from, because unfortunately the stability moment in the last 2 or 3 years, which has been great for the balance sheet, as you can see on this graph, has not been permanently banked in institutional changes or rule changes that would ensure that we don't come back up here. So that's what I'm worried about. This is just more of the same. This is just allocations also. Let me, you know about crowd out of credit better than I do, so not much here to say. The amount of borrowing that the government is doing from the banking system has been very high for a few years now, and has risen. We are one of the countries with the most adverse ratio of government versus private sector banking, or sort of loans borrowing in the world. And so I'm sure you understand this intuitively much better than I do. The development budget has been cut by 16% after inflation adjustment. Subsidies have been cut 15%. Interest is down itself. And of the ones that have increased, the largest two in terms of their size are defense, which is up about 8.7% in real terms, and the Benazir Income Support Program, which is up about 8% in real terms. What you don't see here is that the entire increase in the Benazir Income Support Program, which is widely sort of celebrated as a worthwhile way to create social protection, is actually by cutting previous allocations from education and health by the federal government and reallocating that money into BISP. So if I were to combine the federal government spending on education, health, and BISP, over time that hasn't changed, but BISP has grown. So this is very concerning. It's also concerning because BISP is very small compared to, I showed you the labor force and the gaps there. BISP alone cannot fix our deep social problem of unemployment and poverty increase. And that will only come through an architectural increase. I've talked about this already. This is just saying that debt, well, here the debt is the largest piece of what the federal government spends on. And I've again told you about social protection versus education and health. And the dashed line above is what the federal government spends on the social sector overall. And you can see that this is very flat. In fact, has fallen in the last 15 years. Let me skip this. You know that the big headline the day before the budget was that the provinces are being asked to run surpluses. The surpluses that have been asked for are unprecedented since the 18th Amendment. What I might not have here is I've done a different study which is showing that the provincial spend on education in particular, and remember that education, because it's a devolved subject, is mostly financed by the provincial governments. Spending on education has fallen in the last 10 years on a inflation-adjusted per capita terms. So this is a short-term measure that's been taken, but until we sit down as a society and think about how to re-architecture ourselves, I have a column yesterday in Dawn, which is titled "The Ponzi Scheme," which talks about this. You're not going to have good incentives either for the federal government or the provincial government to fix this. Mazum Saab talked about the real effective exchange rate. This is I've had the Prime Minister and some of the leading business people in the business community and others talk to me about how Pakistan doesn't respond to depreciation. And usually that discussion happens in the context of the nominal exchange rate. The dollar went from 100 to 300, exports didn't increase. And there are two things to remember there. I'm not going to get too deep into this conversation, but one is that you really want to look at the nominal, the real effective exchange rate, because you need to see net of inflation, what's happening, right? So this is an example from Germany, where you can see that Pakistan, the rupee went from rupee lost relative to the euro, a large chunk of its value. But then Pakistan's inflation was higher than Germany's, and that went right up. So in real terms, there was no devaluation relative to Germany. So if we were to take a naive look at this and say, the rupee lost value compared to the euro, look, we went from 100 to 167 or whatever. Why didn't exports to Germany, for example, increase? The answer is we didn't have depreciation or devaluation, rather. We didn't have a real effective exchange rate terms change. And anyway, so I'll skip this. This is further evidence on this. You all know that the balance of payments issue, the trade balance gets plugged by remittances. We basically spend all our remittances to finance more imports. And we haven't built up, in particular, we haven't built up our import cover. So in the average number of months of import cover in the world is 8 months. Really, the target should be a year of import cover. We have stayed at 2 or 3%, even as remittances went up after 9/11. So we need to sterilize more of our remittances. That will cause the dollar to go up a little bit. As long as we are holding the real effective exchange rate at a certain level, I am confident that over time we will see trade improve. The other thing that I'd add there is that every time that we see devaluation, it happens erratically, and because we were forced into a corner. We have never in Pakistan's history, as far as I can, as far as I know, ever tried to follow a sustained devaluation policy for 3 to 4 to 5 years, which is when expectations in the business community can change, and you'd want to start thinking about investing more in the export sector. So this is just reserves, slow reserves building that we're seeing. So the big picture is that stabilization is real, but it's financial and not structural. So as soon as you start to try to push growth up again, you're going to go back into the same old problems that you've had. The squeeze is going to be on development, and that means if you're not spending on development, if you're not fixing your investments to GDP ratio, your future, is predisposed. You're predisposed to low growth in the future. And we've got our external sector problems. What you want to watch for is whether the FBR target is met, whether we're going to actually increase the tax base. Everyone knows this. Whether this sort of the primary and provincial surpluses that we've settled on a day before the budget will actually hold. Whether whether we'll find finally a logical, a rational basis for dividing responsibilities and monies between the federation, the provinces, and the district level or the sub-provincial levels. Whether we will come to a different sort of strategy, whether we'll try something different on the rupee and exports. So let me just end by saying that there's a lot of area to cover, and every day you'll have different analysis. But let me just say this, that we need to step back and think on the past 10 or 15 years, what has happened, and what is the best explanation we have for why it happened that way. The only explanation that I find typically is that we had political instability and there was corruption. But really, we need to deepen our analysis and come to a few consensus ideas on what strategies perhaps have gone wrong, and to look for a budget that actually moves the needle structurally on the basis of some consensus amongst us on what we are going to try differently. We need to, at least, even if we're going to fail to grow fast next year, it has to be trying different things. And my big message is that it's still business as usual on the big picture stuff. Thank you.
Ali, thank you very much. That was terrific. Lots of data, lots to think about. I think we've come to the end of our session, and I'd just like to thank all the speakers for their wonderful contribution. Greatly appreciated, and obviously we'll stay in touch with you. For those of you who've made presentations, do please share them with us. We will spread them around. And thank you. Dr. Zila, if you'd just like to say anything in conclusion, that would be most appreciated.
Well, I would just like to thank all the panelists. Very, very insightful and stimulating. I appreciate the fact that the topics that were covered are all relevant to what all of us talk about, think about, and do for a living. So thank you very much. And to add to it, also as citizens of Pakistan and everybody thinking and working towards the betterment of Pakistan. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Have a nice evening.